Okay, so this is outcome M1 from the Manitoba curriculum, and this is video 1 of 1. It's called Using a Referent. Okay, so the question is, what is a referent? Okay, a referent is an everyday object that we can use to estimate a unit of measure. We often use body parts as referents. For example, our feet are naturally, of course, very similar to 1 foot in the Imperial measure system. We can use the width of our little finger for the centimeter in the metric system. In fact, our thumb as well can be used for 1 inch. Not the entire thumb, just look from your knuckle to the end of your thumb. That should be about 1 inch. In fact, inch is the Scottish word for thumb. And before we had any kind of standardized measurement units, like meters and whatnot, body parts were usually the standard for creating measurements. And it resulted in tons of different problems and tons of different kinds of measurements. And some of them are now archaic. For example, the cubit. This one we don't use anymore. But the cubit is an archaic unit of length based on the length of the forearm from your elbow to the tip of your middle finger. Okay, so we don't really measure in cubits anymore, but you still could if you wanted to. Another old measurement system is called the hand, and that's literally the length of your hand from the wrist all the way to the end of your middle finger, I believe. And now this is a non-Système International, a non-SI unit that is really not used anymore, except, oddly, for the height of horses. So if you want to measure a horse height, you can measure that in hands. Of course, a referent does not always have to be an object. For example, we can use the distance we walk in 20 minutes as a referent for 1 mile. Or maybe for 1 kilometer, depending on how fast you walk. So a referent is not always very precise. It gives us a very good approximation, but it's not perfect by any means. Okay, now it's your turn. Why don't you come up with a referent that you could use, something in the room around you, or maybe a body part that you could use for 1 meter or for 1 foot. Okay, so you could come up with some kind of example for each of those. And then you could test this out. Go measure the length of the room you're in right now, the dimensions of the room, by using the referent that you've created. And then if you have a measuring tape, you can also measure it in the exact amounts, and you can compare, well, how good a referent did you have?